Welcome everyone to today's CERTLcast on engaging students with high impact practices. This is the second in our 4-part event series, and today's session is focusing on engaging students with global learning in the classroom. We'll hear from Hillary Kahn later today, but I want to kick things off with a welcome on behalf of the CERTL Network. If you're new to CERTL, if you're unfamiliar with us, we are the Center for the Integration of Research, Teaching, and Learning. And we are a network of 38 universities in the US and Canada working to make the sciences more diverse by changing how they're taught in very brief form. We do a lot of online programming like this event series. We also offer courses and workshops to provide inclusive evidence-based teacher training to grad students and postdocs who know they want to go into teaching careers. And this event series on building engagement with your students so that all students can learn well in the sciences is a big part of the work that we do and deeply connected to our mission. So we're really excited to see so many people joining us today. I'm certain we'll have more folks join in the first 10 minutes of our session. And with that, I believe I am going to hand things off to Tabitha Hardy from IUPUI, one of CERTL's member institutions, and she will provide us with some quick introductions for today's session.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Tabitha Hardy, and I'm the Interim Assistant Vice Chancellor for Graduate Education and the Assistant Dean for Student Development and Academic Affairs at IUPUI, or Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. I just want to thank everybody today for joining us for part 2 of our CERTLcast series on engaging students through high impact teaching practices. If you joined us last time, then you know that you're in for a treat. If you didn't join us last time, then we're so excited to see you and that you're joining us today. Today's session is going to focus on global learning and engagement. And our speaker for today is Dr. Jerry Day. He's a professor of sociology and the executive associate dean in the Institute for Engaged Learning at IUPUI. He works closely with the Associate Vice Chancellor for Undergraduate Education, the Engaged Institute for Engaged Learning team, and other units to promote the equitable progressions of IUPUI's over 20,000 undergraduate students. Today, Jerry's also going to be joined by Dr. Hillary Kahn. Hillary is our Associate Vice Chancellor for International Affairs at IUPUI, and she's an IU Bicentennial Professor. So welcome everyone, and without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jerry.
Hey, Tabitha, thanks so much for that. Really appreciate it. Hillary is the expert. I'm sort of just doing some stuff at the front end and some stuff at the back end, but my colleague Hillary Kahn is amazing and is going to share her background and her expertise in this space after we do some preliminary stuff over the next couple of minutes. If you'll allow me, I'm just going to share my screen to set us up for what we're going to be doing for today. And what we're going to be talking about is global learning as a high impact practice. This is part 2 of this CERTLcast. Part 1, we provided an overview of high impact practices, and I'll talk about those in a second. Our goals for today is hopefully after the hour is completed, you're going to have a good working definition of what global learning is, be able to articulate some characteristics and elements of what a global classroom looks like. Identify and employ global learning strategies in your own courses, either ones you might be teaching now or ones that you might teach in the future. And then we're going to have you think a little bit about some situational and disciplinary factors that might impact your ability to implement global learning in your classes. And so Hillary is going to tee all of this up for us, set us all up to have that reflection and have some conversation in the last 15 minutes of our session today. Our timeline is we're going to do a quick mentee poll. If you were with us last week, I like these because it helps us to sort of see where you're at as an audience and also build on some prior knowledge and experiences that you had to put us in the mind space of the topic for today. Hillary's going to work through a PowerPoint presentation and provide some thoughts and resources on global learning, a definition, what a global classroom looks like, and the importance of making connections, and again, those situational factors and contexts. Like last week, we're going to have to try and allocate some time for some breakout conversations so you guys can talk with each other and then maybe report back a little bit. And then obviously at the end, we'll be happy to entertain some questions for you. So what I'd like to do first, well, before I get into the mentee poll, if you weren't with us last week, this is about global learning as a high impact practice. Well, what are HIPs? What are high impact practices? There are 11 of them. The Association of American Colleges and Universities has identified these 11 practices as being transformative in the lives of students. They increase student engagement, they increase student learning, and they increase student success. Students are retained at higher levels, and students persist towards graduation and graduate at higher levels when they participate in these high impact practices. Some of them are tailored more towards first year students, others are tailored towards sophomores and juniors, second and third year students, and ones like capstones typically come in the last year. Then there are some high impact practices you can embed in any part of the curriculum, like an e-portfolio and our topic for today, global engagement and global learning. It can come anywhere in the curriculum, which makes it really exciting. And you have the ability and the power to actually implement it in your own course. So before we get into Hillary's presentation, what we thought could be useful is to do a quick mentee. And so I am going to share my Word Chrome here. And can you all see this question? When you hear the expression global learning, what terms come to mind? If you can go to mentee.com, this is a word cloud, and if you could type in the code 6091757, type in what you think of when you hear the expression global learning. What comes to mind when you hear that expression? This is great, folks. Keep it up. Give you another minute or two. So just very quickly, I see study abroad on there. I think that's what a lot of people think about when they think about global learning. You have to go somewhere else, something that's international, outside of our borders, exposure to culture and diversity. But I love some of these other words on here: inclusion, different cultures. I see the word engagement, which is fantastic. I love that shrinking world and interconnected. This is fantastic. So I don't lose it, I'm going to take a picture of it with my phone. Excellent. Another 10 seconds. I think it's great, all of this stuff. Thank you all for sharing. Okay, we got about 90 responses. Awesome. Okay, we're going to go to the second mentee question. We'd like to get your background on global engagement. Did you participate in a global learning experience during your undergraduate education? And so we've broken these up into 4 categories. Either you participated in a study abroad program or course, you may have participated in a global learning experience on your campus. Maybe you don't believe you participated in anything related to a study abroad or a global learning experience on your campus, or maybe there's something we didn't think of and you want to give it an other. So this is just us sort of seeing where our audience is right now to see what kind of background you had as an undergraduate student dealing with global learning. Okay, this is great. We got 41. I know there's about 90 of you who responded to the word cloud, so I'll give you a few more seconds. You can reply to more than one of these, I believe. So we gave folks the option to click on more than one. So far, the majority don't believe they participated in anything related to global learning or had participated in a global learning experience. Hillary's heart is breaking right now. 16 folks in a study abroad. Okay, it looks like the responses have slowed down. So I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to take another picture of this so we can talk about it later. Excellent. Okay, I am going to stop my share and I'm going to stop that presentation. And I'm going to come back to the PowerPoint. Sorry to be jumping around here on you folks. Okay, so those are our two mentee polls. I'm going to turn it over next to Hillary, and she's going to talk a little bit about maybe some of her reactions to the two mentee polls and how it might tie into some of the things that she's going to talk about related to global learning in the global classroom. I will say Hillary joined our campus. She's been with Indiana University for a long time, but she joined the IUPUI campus a little bit more than a year ago. And she's just been a trailblazer doing amazing work on our campus, helping us internationalize our curriculum. I'll just say real brief, I've enjoyed working with her since she arrived. She's a great colleague, a good friend, a good mentor to me. But also just some context on the person you're hearing from. Last year when COVID-19 hit in March, we had students scattered all over the globe, and she was working tirelessly to bring these students home and to help our international students themselves get home. And during all of that, Hillary decided, well, maybe I'll apply for a Department of Education grant. And so she applied for an undergraduate international studies and foreign language program grant through the Department of Education to actually work with my team and my unit to help internationalize the first year experience. So in the midst of all of that, she applies for this grant and she wins it. And so, which is an amazing opportunity for us as a campus. She's been using video conferencing technology to link classrooms overseas. She's taught students in Macedonia, Indonesia, and Russia. And she's also led an international service learning program to Jamaica. So Hillary brings us a large, long breadth of experience and professional experience to internationalization and study abroad. And I'm really thankful that she's with us today. Hillary, thanks so much.
Thank you, Jerry. Everything I very much appreciate being part of the team at IUPUI and working with you as well. And hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me come talk to you. As Jerry said, I am very, very passionate about these issues, about global learning, about making sure that we are creating intentional opportunities for all students to engage with global learning. So as far as the mentee polls, yes, you broke my heart a bit on that second one. I'll talk about the first one in a second. But you know what? It's not surprising. I think there's still a real perception that when you say global learning, you think about study abroad. Now, you actually showed a little bit that you were able to sort of dissect that subject matter a bit more in the other mentee poll. But I have a feeling that I hope that many of you were engaged in global learning in ways that you might not have actually been sort of definitively articulated in a syllabus. And that I would love to think that many of your professors and faculty were sort of teaching towards global learning outcomes in some courses. But at the same point, it's not surprising that study abroad is still very much, the iconic, representative of global learning. And if I actually had one thing that you could take away from, there's a lot of things I hope you can take away from this session, but one of them is that global learning is not just study abroad. And the type of work that we're going to be talking about here, the type of global learning is actually global learning at home, even more so. Because there's many different institutions where certain institutions where 0.25% of the students may be studying abroad, down to less than 1%. I mean, it's a range. Overall, across the country, it's still a very small number of students who are actually getting the opportunities to study abroad, like 2 or 3% in the entire country overall. And so what about the other 90, 95, 98%? And that's really, I think, where I'm sort of leading this presentation towards, is making sure that all students have an opportunity to engage globally and craft that sort of global mindset. Now, wait, hold on. I had the poll up. I took a picture of it, now I lost it. Here it is. So the mentee poll. So I'm actually a cultural anthropologist. So I love to see culture right front and center. And that's very appropriate, actually, because to be a globally learned individual, you need to have a really good grasp on culture, your own culture and that of others. And so we'll be talking a bit about that. Diversity is obviously it's all diversity, but it's interesting. I wanted just to point out that one thing that institutions around the nation and world, but particularly within the United States context, probably don't do as good a job on is bridging the issues of social justice and diversity in a local context with that of global learning. And it's certainly something that we are, I think, working on at IUPUI, and many institutions are doing as well. When you really think about the outcomes, the goals, the objectives for international learning, multicultural learning, they're one and the same. They have different histories, sort of different trajectories, but the goals of engagement and encouraging individuals to transcend difference, to be comfortable with difference, I think they're very, very similar. So Jerry, you can go ahead and switch if you'd like. So what I really want to do is just focus on what is global learning, kind of give you an introduction to what it is, particularly focusing not just on study abroad, but global learning at home more broadly. I could sit and give you a few slides of data of all the reasons why we need students and learners to be globally engaged. I could give you statistics of employers who need their employees to be able to work in sort of multicultural teams, transnational teams. I could give you examples of how foreign language, world languages are critical to employers. I could demonstrate how intercultural communication is a skill set that is increasingly required and prioritized when employers, multinationals, for example, institutions are looking for people to hire. But I'm assuming that you know that. I'm assuming that you know how important it is to have that global mindset. So what I really want to focus on is what it is. And I want to talk a little bit to begin about the platinum rule. And I don't know if any of you have read an article by Milton Bennett, and he's a pretty well-known intercultural theorist. And Milton Bennett talks about the platinum rule. It's an article. It's called the article is called "Overcoming the Golden Rule: Sympathy and Empathy," and he speaks about how so much of global learning, cross-cultural engagement, and a lot of the work that often falls under global learning is really about the golden rule. That it's assuming that there's some level of similarity, and many of us. Probably all of us know the golden rule. I will share the title. The title again is "Overcoming the Golden Rule: Sympathy and Empathy." But the golden rule is do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and that's sort of the basic rule of sort of simple, maybe cross-cultural. Engagement, but that leads to only sort of a shallow level of maybe sympathy, right? Where you are really only understanding others through your own perspective, right? If it's do unto others as you would have them do unto you, then it is still about your own perspective of understanding that is defining the relationship that you're creating with others. And what Milton Bennett suggests is that for global learning, to have real engagement, to almost bring it to the level of true empathy, right? True engagement, you need to take a leap to the platinum rule, which would do unto others as they would do unto themselves. That's a big shift. Let me say that again. Do unto others as they would do unto themselves. So you, the individual, you are no longer the frame of reference. It is now about you are literally stepping out of your perspective into that of another and understanding the world through that new frame. That is global learning. That is the platinum rule. And that is really where I think what I'm going to be trying to emphasize the next few slides. So it's about integrating all of these different types of perspectives and frames of reference. And that includes personal frames of reference. It includes disciplinary frames of reference. It includes national, different cultural understanding, and so on. It's about integrating all of those. And I've written before about that. I think about it as you're seeing the world through a prism, right? And you're integrating all of these different facets and lights and perspectives into a cohesive whole. Global learning's about creating new knowledge through collaboration, through talking, through, you can't do global learning without actually engaging in some type of collective knowledge production. It's about learning from others. It's also not just about knowledge, skills, and attitudes. And I want to emphasize this, that it's certainly about knowledge, skills, and attitudes, but it's also about actions and responsibilities. So global learning does take that sort of traditional cognitive set of outcomes and really brings it to the fact that you also need to be thinking about affective, outcomes, attitudes, actions, responsibilities. How are we actually getting people to engage the world and do something about, recognize where they are in the world and taking action on that. So it's about thinking about yourself, your surroundings, and then it's about I also want to say in this context, I think most of you are based in, if not all, based at institutions in the United States. The global learning can happen in the United States. And again, this is another really important point that please take this away too, is that do not think that you have to go abroad to be globally engaged. Do not think that you need to only focus on international content, international issues to have a global learning mindset in your classrooms. It's also about the US. The US is part of the globe, and all you need to do is really think about all of those interconnections to make, subject matter of the United States part of global learning. Again, global learning's about bringing it back home. So it's about learning about students, encouraging students to engage otherness and the sort of the differential, the particularities of the world, but also about making sense of it home. It has to be anchored back home to themselves. Go ahead, Jerry. So you're probably wondering, okay, first let me just tell you, I'm a visual anthropologist. So maybe this is explaining a little bit about this. I cannot give a lecture or a presentation with somehow not having some visual metaphor that is sort of guides our thinking. And when I think about global learning and also global studies, because I do a lot of global scholarship, global research, and I utilize this metaphor of oceans and islands in the same way, that I just wanted to bring this up because one of the things that is also really, really critical in global learning or in a global learning classroom is that you are encouraging your students and you as an educator within this context of navigating multiple scales, right? You need to be able to navigate, to use a very tired dichotomy, the global and the local, right? You need to be able to navigate and not just see as binaries, in fact, but to sort of see seamlessly the micro and the macro. You need to be able to think very broadly and very specifically. You need to be able to think about the general and the specific. And that's what you need to be engaging students to be able to do, is to sort of navigate and flow between these different sort of scales of analysis. You need to think about universalism and relativistic way of thinking, and not think about them in sort of polar opposition, but ratherly sort of working together. You can be a universalist and a relativist at the same time. And just to say, again, I'm a cultural anthropologist. I don't know if there's any other cultural anthropologists out there, but that is something that didn't always come naturally for me to say. But why I have this image of oceans and islands is because there's a field of study in area studies called Pacific studies or Oceania studies. And really, it's a really great field of scholarship, and it's very, very different from traditional area studies. And I can say this because I'm a Latin Americanist. I grew up in sort of the area studies mindset, but oceanic studies really focuses on that basically when you look at a sea, that it's not an empty space between islands, right? But that the islands themselves, the sea themselves rather, is equally as important as the islands. And so for people who know oceanic studies and know about the importance of water and navigation and the history and ancestors and everything connected, not just to islands, but to also the sea themselves, it's a really important metaphor and a really nice kind of symbol for us to be thinking about it. And there's Peli Haufa, who's a very well-known oceanic scholar, talks about how Oceania, Pacific studies is not just about, we just don't have isolated islands in a sea, but rather we have a sea of islands, right? So again, it's that very global and the very local, and that ability to sort of organically go back and forth between them. That's what you need to really have a global mindset. Okay, perfect. So global, so what does this all mean? How are you going to take this and bring it into a classroom? Again, I kind of gave you the really big, sort of maybe theoretical perspective, but now it's time, and this is where the real fun part is making sure that this type of understanding is transferred and translated into our classrooms. And there's a variety of different ways for us to do this. And here's just some, very simple examples of some of the things that you can do in a classroom. You can create, did we skip can I just go back? Did we skip one line? We didn't, did we? Didn't know if okay, we're good. Sorry. Thanks, Jerry. We're totally good. Okay, I thought we skipped a slide for a second. So what are some of the things that you can do? One thing is you're really trying to kind of, how do I say this? Turn students into the educators as much as they are the learners. And one of the tough parts, I would say, for global learning is also that you as an instructor, as a faculty member, as a educator, also need to kind of challenge who you are and put yourself in the role of learner too. So kind of challenge that role of learner educator and break down that binary as well. So encourage students to learn from each other, working with students to co-learn, solve global problems, recognizing the diversity and the international perspectives that you already have in your classroom. Syllabi, of course, is all you have to do is look at your syllabi to know whether you're really having a global classroom or not, because it's very easy to fall back on having a syllabi that is basically the same course that you were provided 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and just repeating that rather than sort of thinking about what new perspectives, what international voices, authors do you have, what international journals do you have, what multiple languages might you be able to also utilize in your classroom, in your syllabi, and so on. So one of the first things I often tell is look at the syllabi. What are you reading? What are you having your students to read? Jerry, keep going. Utilize engaging with the community, asking students to, again, read foreign newspapers, not just, US-based newspapers, but foreign newspapers, foreign media, and so on. Many of your students might have multiple, if we're lucky, they might be bilingual, trilingual, they might have multiple languages. Utilize that, take advantage of them, use that as a resource, leverage that, pull that out into your own teaching in a classroom. Again, encouraging students to just think about the differences that they have among them. Service learning, getting students out of the seat, right? Getting students out of their seats. That's high impact practices, right? These are all high impact practices. Every single one of these sort of different ideas that I'm suggesting here are really about engaging students, making learning more active. So physically getting them out of their homes, of their classrooms. It's harder right now. I should probably be, in a COVID-19 world, it's more difficult, but challenge them. And then below this is designing activities that pull students out of their academic cultural comfort zones. And I don't know if you're familiar with Mesro, but he would call these these disorienting dilemmas. You need to make students feel a little uncomfortable. And if you in a safe sort of risk-averse way, right? I think Brene Brown would call them a brave space. You need to challenge the students to really engage, think about the world, think about themselves in different ways. This is why that's why study abroad is so powerful, right? The reason study abroad is one of those life-changing activities, experiences, is because of culture shock, because of that moment of dissonance where you are out of your safe space and really learning. That's where learning really happens. And that's what you really need to be doing, is getting students to be really thinking about those different perspectives, challenging their own perspectives. I often talk about how global learning is about making sure that you and your students know that you have these cultural values, right? That you have these different lenses of seeing the world, including disciplinary lenses. And so you need to get your students to be recognizing those perspectives, that they have these lenses. It's hard to take off those perspectives because that's what is challenging and scary. So you're not telling students to take off their cultural lens or their perspective, but you're at least getting students, you want students to make sure that they know that they have these lenses on. That's the critical key. One more, Jerry. Again, just doing a lot of group work, multiple readings of different perspectives. Of course, these days, interactive technology, I mean, even before COVID-19, you couldn't do global learning without some sort of interactive technology. You need to be engaging students in global conversations. On Wednesday, I'm actually teaching a freshman year seminar. We're connecting with a class in Mexico. It's a sophomore class. We're going to have we're actually doing it twice. We're meeting on Wednesday with a group of, they're all from the engineering students actually, from an institute in Mexicali. And we're going to be talking about intercultural issues and just some introduction piece of work of global engagement. Very simple, not simple, foundational. Then in a few weeks later, we're going to have a conversation about the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and how we're approaching those from different perspectives, and which ones matter to them versus which ones matter to us. Jerry, keep going. So, Jerry, go one more. Okay, so I'm going to try and wrap this up because I really do want us to get a chance to talk to each other about this. This is often the way we see the world, right? This is often the way we learn about the world, in fact. This is the way we're taught about the world, especially in elementary school, and even in college in many cases, at universities. We are taught that we exist within a particular culture, within a particular nation state, within a particular world. We have these sort of concentric circles of identity, and it's all about these sort of bounded worlds in which we live. But the truth of the matter is that the world is bloody complicated. Jerry, please, now go ahead. This is the world, right? This is truly the world that we exist in. It's very interconnected. Our identities are sectional. There's these ideas of bounded nations, bounded cultures, bounded senses of self is just not the actual way we live and exist in this 21st century very connected world. So this is the kind of world that we want to be encouraging our students to think about, and that this is the approach that we can't be afraid to represent. It's easier to teach about the concentric circles. It's a lot easier. But if we're going to be global learning educators, we need to be focusing on the complicated. So situational factors. All of this that I just threw at you matters. It's up to you to really determine of what global learning is going to look like in your classroom. It's going to depend on the context of the course, what kind of discipline, what your profession is. It could matter to about the accreditation requirements of your profession. Obviously, whatever the course topic is, it matters, the learner, the demographics of the learners, whether there's other co-curricular opportunities and what's on your campus. There's not one right way. Go ahead, Jerry. So it's very much the, it really depends on all of these different contexts. The one thing I want to say is that ideally, we do not want to be thinking about global learning as an add-on, right? We don't want it to be okay, now I'm going to have my global learning day necessarily. Really, what ideally we're trying to do is integrate global learning into your class so that it helps you do what you already set out to do better. And that's really critical, that you need to think about global learning, all of those activities that we just went through. How can they help you achieve the objectives that you already have set forth for a particular class? Okay, Jerry, one more. I think we're, okay. So just to end, and then we're going to break out into breakout rooms. I think Kate's almost ready for this. Jerry, can you go back to the questions for a sec? Thanks. So can every course be internationalized? Yeah, I actually think every class can be internationalized, and I think it can. Every class, because I'm always hearing people saying, well, how the heck can I internationalize my bio class or my science or my math class? Like, how am I supposed to internationalize a math class? Right? It's very, very difficult. So I'm going to give you actually a couple of examples, and then we're going to break out. But I do want to say the answer to the should every course be internationalized is no, probably not, no. It could be, but it need not be. But I think what we're going to try to get you to start thinking about in the breakout rooms is how might you start to think about global learning in your particular disciplinary professional course context. As far as the math question though, like how would I teach a math class internationally? You could talk about the international history of math pretty easily. It's actually really, really interesting how, if you look at how math is prioritized and developed, put into the high school curriculum, made more rigorous based on international relations, right? Based on the foreign policy issues of the day. Think about calculus. You know that calculus within the United States context only became like mainstream in US history after Sputnik in 1957, when the United States started freaking out that we were falling behind in the sort of the race and lagging behind STEM disciplines within the sort of the broader world. That's when all the STEM disciplines, astrophysics and so on, became really upped, and it was, you could make those connections. You could talk about how math is taught differently. You could talk about the UN Sustainable Development Goals and start to, look at the different statistics based on the way the goals are being achieved in certain countries or not being achieved in certain countries. There's a million ways that you could, internationalize every course. So I think what we'd like to do is we're going to have these questions. Jerry, you can go ahead, and these are the questions that we're going to be asking you to think about in your breakout rooms. Why does your particular profession or discipline need global learning? How can it help you, be a better sociologist, be an engineer, be a historian, be a better nurse? And again, this comes down to the part of, this is not about like, yes, I took my global learning course. This is about making better engineers, better anthropologists, better scientists. Better at what you already need to do. And then how can it make you a more effective and engaging educator? How can it make you teach in more effective ways? So these are the questions. I think we're gonna break you out right now.
All right, we are all back.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. Thanks for coming back. Hey, we had actually a really interesting conversation. The facilitators met and we actually continued the conversation, and I hope you did the same. I think we just want to kind of open it up to some questions, but also to any commentary, things that you feel you would like to share with the group would be superb. I think we can let people talk, right? Audio is working. Okay.
Yeah, and if folks have questions, feel free to either type in the chat window or go to the participant panel and use that little blue hand to raise your hand and let us know that you have a question.
Because I can also tell you, I'm a terrible educator. I will totally ask you questions if you don't ask us, but I would love the conversation to start with you.
Does anyone want to share anything from their breakout group in response to some of those questions?
Well, I can start. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I was talking to, I'm sorry, don't remember your name. Let me just check. Angela, I think, right? And something she mentions that I liked was the idea that we focus a lot on the differences and on the shock when we think about studying abroad and learning about other cultures, but actually we also learn that there are many similarities. Like I'm Brazilian, and when I went to UGA, I felt very welcomed, and I didn't know. I mean, of course, there were some specific differences, but it was very easy to adjust, and I didn't expect that. I thought it would be something very uncomfortable at first, but it wasn't. So.
That's a great point, and thank you for bringing that up. And I couldn't agree more. I think we focus on the differences, but the truth is we need to focus on, again, break down that dichotomy between difference and similarity, but really also focusing on what brings us together. And that's actually why I think, for example, in the course that I'm teaching on Wednesday, that's exactly what we're doing. And that's how we've prefaced it to the students. It's about our similarities and our differences, and how to feel comfortable with them both. Good point. Anybody else?
I don't know how to raise a blue hand, but I really appreciated meeting the people in my breakout room. That was one of my first breakout room experiences. So that was really enjoyable. And one of the things I'll take away from that is just the idea of the missed opportunity of not hearing the perspectives of other people and learning about the cultures and solutions and ideas. And that was something that we talked about, whether it's medical or whether it's in your field. You learn things from other people, and if you're not willing to open up and listen to them, you're going to miss, important information. So that was it.
Well, part of it being a global, educator, being globally minded, it's about just that, Britt. It's about listening. You have to listen, and that's a tough skill that many of us don't have. And it's an acquired skill. We're just not trained to necessarily. We're trained in academia to talk and represent your perspectives and have a strong, stance on a particular, theoretical model or whatever. But to listen, that's different. Even when we're listening in a classroom, we're typically listening, preparing to respond, right? But global learning actually is encouraging us to literally just listen sometimes. Yeah, and then putting it together, but it's tough. It's a great point. Others?
I have one. So one of the things that our group actually talked about was a strategy on how to be more effective and engaging. And Gwendolyn had a really great point that she uses imagery of like other cultures or something that's going to tie in with the lecture that she's giving or the class she's teaching, the topic. And the other three of us in the group were all very hard STEM scientists. And we're like, how would we do that? And an idea we came up with is being able to incorporate that almost outside the classroom and give the students the option to learn more about either the history or different cultures, just so it's inclusive, but not necessarily taking up too much time in the classroom if we needed that time for other stuff.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it all has to make sense, again, to your own particular, classroom demographics, professional context, and so on. I'm actually, again, I mentioned I'm a visual anthropologist. I use a lot of artwork in my classrooms, and I've taught human rights through the arts. I use a lot of visual, means, pedagogies, and so on. But again, it has to make sense. It has to make sense to you and to your students, and taking that outside the classroom, that might be something that we've learned that, and hopefully we'll retain in a post-COVID world when we get there, is that importance of all that work and thinking and processing that's happening outside of a classroom, and then bringing it back in for some of that sort of collective sharing and rebuilding and so on. And so, yeah, taking advantage, that's the getting them out of the seats perspective. Get your students out of the seats, whether it's literally or more metaphorically. Change that perspective. I think we might have 1 second left for another comment, question. Does anybody want to get the last word in? I just want to say, again, small world, right? This is a good example of how, how connected we are, how similar we are, how different we are, and how we really just need to be creating strategies and opportunities in our classrooms and on Zoom meetings for us to connect with the world and to learn from the world. So I just want to thank you all so much for this great opportunity to talk with you. Jerry, thank you. The whole crew, the Serial crew, thank you. It was a lot of fun for me, and I just wish you all the best. Thank you.